How can you, at a reasonable cost, determine which pigments are in your painting or watercolour? This video may help you, or perhaps you'd like to take advantage of the service provided by the Art Detective. But be warned, organic pigments can be very difficult to determine, even by highly specialised laboratories. So what are we aiming at? Well, first we will look at any white pigments in the work. They can be very useful. And if we find a wrong pigment, is it because of restoration? We will take a closer look. So what methods do we use? Well, firstly, a general visual examination. And we also utilise a USB microscope. And also a UV light can be very useful. XRF utilises X-rays to determine the elements present in the pigments. And the Niton 980 gold analyzer is extremely sensitive and detects light elements from magnesium upwards. At this point, most non-organic pigments will be identified or narrowed down to perhaps 2 possible pigments. And for confirmation, we use FORS, which is fibre optics reflectance. So let's get started. Here we have a charming French watercolour by an unlisted artist, and I would suspect it's about 1880, 1900. So let's have a look. Now, I spoke earlier about how useful white pigments can be. And here we examine the white pigments with an ultraviolet torch. Now, you probably know the importance of titanium white, introduced after 1920. So it shouldn't appear on works before that date. Note here also the yellow cast from the zinc white and the pinkish reflection from the lithopone. In fact, lead white is the white pigment which, under UV light, reflects white. Also, later additions to the work may be visible. Around the signature is a good place to look. Here we see no noticeable UV response from the white, so it's probably lead white. And there are no other oddities. So now we bring out the big guns, XRF. Firstly, we want to identify those areas which have the purest pigment. Pigment mixes make determination somewhat more complicated. So this is where we use the USB microscope. What may appear to the naked eye to be pure pigment is often a mix of several, and we don't want that. Using the inbuilt camera, we can accurately locate the XRF gun on those areas selected. Now, I always operate remotely and use this sponge holder to avoid damage to the work. The elements analysed display on the screen progressively as the XRF gun uses different filters and settings to enable best detection of light and heavy elements. Here is how we analyse the results. Now, the readout on the left is for an area of the paper which had no pigment. This is the background reading. Top right is the readout for the white pigment. And immediately we see PB, lead, and AS, arsenic, near the top of the list. And if we look at my flowchart for white pigments, the right-hand one shows PB and AS. So it is lead white. And you may question the high S, sulfur, and Si, silica readings. Now, silica is most likely used as a substrate or filler in the pigment. The sulfur reading we will look at later. Next, we look at the Reg Pigment. Now, although it is a little down the list, we see Hg, Mercury. Now, this is a definitive marker element for vermilion. But we have something very interesting here. Quite high readings for Mg, magnesium, and P, phosphorus. If we look at the 3mm spot analysed, shown by the red circle, we can see some black lines. And the Mg and P, magnesium, phosphorus, indicate these are probably bone black. So, 2 elements for the price of 1. Now, if there wasn't any phosphorus, there would be a possibility that the Mg derives from a chalk filler used in pigment preparations. Perhaps for carmine, an organic element. But the phosphorus indicates bone black, and this is the nature of pigment identification in the real world. Now, the green pigment is also a mixture, primarily consisting of green earth, and the blue is clearly ultramarine blue, artificial, which was produced from 1820. Now, just to backtrack, we spoke of the high sulfur reading for the lead white analysis. It shouldn't be there. So what's happening? Now, we have to look at the spectra. And to cut to the chase, because it's quite complicated, we look at the peak marked with the PBM alpha 1 line. Now, this peak is very close, in fact, overlaps the sulfur peak. Now, the Niton is a superb instrument, but it is dependent on the peak identification software. And I like to check the peaks because sometimes some are incorrectly identified. And this is what's happened here. So, we've not found any pigments suggesting the work was completed after 1900. The proposed date, 1880-1900, may be correct. Of course, with known artists, sometimes their customary palette is known, so we can determine any rogue pigments. Is it a fake? I hope you found this interesting, and if you are UK based and would like me to analyse the pigments in your artwork for a fraction of the normal cost, please go to my website for the details.